Engage for Success Radio, raising the profile of employee engagement and shining a light on good practice for people who believe there's a better way to work.
Good afternoon and welcome to Engage for Success radio show number 579, Revolutionise Your Workplace. This is quite exciting. This is my first proper time on riverside.fm, our new platform. So hopefully I'm pressing all the right buttons, but we'll see. So today we're going to be talking about why engagement levels are still struggling or even declining. I'm Jo Dodds, your host for today. I'm an engagement consultant working within the Engage for Success core team. The Engage for Success movement is an inclusive movement committed to the idea that there is a better way to work by releasing more of the capability and potential of people at work. We spread the word about employee engagement and shine a light on good practice, inspiring people and workplaces to thrive. And we're widely supported across the UK, involving the public, private and third sectors. If you go to our website, engageforsuccess.org, you can use the link at the bottom of the page to join our newsletter list, and all our social media links are there too. My guest today is a returning guest, a friend of Engage for Success. It's Emma Bridger, who's MD of the PeopleLab and a co-founder of the X Space. Welcome, Emma. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, lovely to be here, Jo, and lovely to be a returning guest after all these years. So, yeah, delighted to be here.
Exactly. And I didn't think to say, do you call it the X Space or do you call it the EX Space?
EX Space
EX.
yeah.
I should have checked that, shouldn't I?
That's all good. So good. We're all friends. It's fine.
So maybe start by introducing yourself and sort of telling us a bit about the transition, because when you were on the show before, you were from the PeopleLab, on its own, and you've written books on employee engagement and so on, and then you've moved more into, I think actually the last time you came on, we probably were talking employee experience, but you've moved into co-founding the EX Space as well. So tell us about that sort of journey.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's fantastic. This is show number 500 and something, right? And just takes you back to when I first met David all those years ago, when I was setting up PeopleLab, a chance meeting at a conference, got chatting, and I joined the movement right at the outset. So been involved with you guys for many, many years. And like you, I'm really passionate about helping companies to, create great places to work and to engage their people. And I think, all those years ago, we all were incredibly passionate. I'm still very passionate. And we had big ideas, big dreams. And I think over the years, I think it's fair to say it's been tough, right? To keep that commitment, that passion, that energy going, because in all honesty, I don't think we've seen the improvements that we'd hoped we would see all those years ago. Gallup, whatever stats you look at, Gallup, whatever, Qualtrics, it shows that we're not really, making the improvements and the strides that we would hope to make. And for me, I've done a lot of thinking about that. And for me, it's about intentionally designing great experiences that deliver engagement. I think we had the right ideas back then, but ultimately my view is that engagement was kind of I guess taken over by the research side of things, the surveys. And it kind of became really about doing a survey, which, I'm all for doing surveys. That's great practice, but it's got to be so much more than that. So setting up the EX Space was really about giving people some really practical tools, inspiration, case studies, community to help unlock what it is we need to do to finally move the dial on engagement. So it's a membership-based learning community where I'm sharing courses, ideas, best practice, everything that I've learned along the way and loads more to help people to really move the dials. That's why it came about.
Lovely. Well, let's talk a bit about why experience design, how it differs from those traditional engagement strategies, and why it's important to do that. I mean, obviously you've talked already about it being practical and actually doing something rather than talking about it. But how do you describe the difference between the experience and the employee engagement as a topic?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really simple, right? It's like engagement is the outcome. Intentional employee experience design is the way we'll get there. So when we design and deliver great experiences for our people, guess what? They're going to be more likely to be engaged, right? That's pretty simple. And I've reflected a lot on where we've gone wrong and why we haven't seen the improvements we wanted to see. And I think that for a lot of people, engagement is this big, intangible concept, and practitioners feel overwhelmed. Where do we start? And obviously, got the great work from Engage for Success, and I've written about that at length in my book. It features in my book heavily, and as you know, I added one more enabler, which is involvement. So we kind of had a framework. But I think even then, those pillars are fantastic. But if we're talking about, say, the manager pillar or the voice pillar, it still feels really big and intangible and unwieldy. Like, where do you start? And so for me, I felt like we had to get a lot more granular and give people some really simple tools to intentionally design experiences that unlock engagement. So rather than making assumptions about what good looks like, we have to help our people to understand, or practitioners to understand, what good looks like for their people inside their organization. So the best practice stuff is great as a kind of a direction, but the idea behind the tools, the idea behind intentionally designing great experiences, is about saying, well, let's take those ideas and really figure out what that means for you in your organization. So it might be that we're looking very specifically at designing a great onboarding experience, so your first impression with an organization is really positive. Or it might be that we're looking at line manager capability and how can we intentionally design that. And for me, I guess the big light bulb moment came as I was, or it didn't come like overnight, but over the years, I was very lucky. Many years ago, about 14 years ago, I worked with Capital One, and they introduced me to design thinking, human-centered design. And as I've delved deeper and deeper into that, for me, the tools that we can beg, borrow, and steal from design thinking, from service design, from agile, give us really practical, quite simple ways to do this, to unlock engagement in terms of designing great experiences that unlock engagement. So that's kind of where I guess that's where my interest is now, where we've kind of gone with the EX space, is kind of using those tools to help practitioners to do that in a really simple way that's not too overwhelming.
Mm, mm. So can you give an example of sort of how that might work? Because I think, most people would say, oh, I can imagine what a great employee experience looks and feels like. But if you say, well, how are you going to make that happen in your organisation? As you say, even at that stage, it still feels overwhelming.
Mm.
Probably you have to, break it down and understand what you're doing. What can people do? What do they do to make that
Yeah,
real?
I think the big difference is a shift from being what I call being expert led. And yeah, we need the expertise. We've got some great expertise, but the big shift is to sort of say, actually, one and one doesn't equal two here, it equals three. So yes, let's be expert led, but let's also be people led as well. So going back to the point I made about not making assumptions, I think you use the words, people could imagine what good might look like. We can all do that. But actually, when I've worked with different organizations, what a good experience looks like for one organization. Let's take Rolls-Royce, for example. I worked with them many years ago. When we kind of delved into what a great experience looks and feels like for Rolls-Royce, very, very different answers to what a great experience looks like for the British Council. And although there will always be some kind of universal themes, because we're all human beings, we all want meaning, we all want purpose, we want connection, we want belonging, we want all that great stuff. Of course we do. There'll be differences as well. And that is, for me, the light bulb moment, is that we can't overestimate the power of taking time to genuinely, research and gather insights around what good looks like for our people. So the big shift for me is around taking time to do that. And it's quite a hard sell, Joe, because lots of organizations go, well, we don't want to do the insight piece. We've already got a survey. An annual survey, once a year survey, is useful to track progress, but it's not going to give you the really deep insights you need to design a great experience for your people. It's just not. So that's a big shift for me. So in terms of the practical tools, we use a kind of a sort of a triple diamond model, which is around, first of all, what does good look like? Okay, so whether you're looking at the overall experience, or maybe you're looking at performance management or onboarding or whatever it might be, or learning development, first of all, you say, where are we today? Let's map the current experience. Let's map the current journey, the good, the bad, the ugly. And let's not make assumptions about that. Let's actually go and maybe physically or virtually get in a room with people who've maybe just gone through that experience or are going through that experience. And they'll tell us, right? So we're actually basing what we're going to do next on real insights rather than our assumptions. So we map the current experience, and then we get clear around what good looks like. So we're not sort of making assumptions about, what a best practice onboarding experience looks like. Our people are telling us this is what we want from onboarding. So we can have an amazing policy, right? But if your first day in a new job, maybe you're going to an office, you're going to a physical place, if people aren't very friendly and no one invites you out for lunch, you don't see a line manager, that experience, no matter how good the policies are and the tools around it, that experience isn't great. So the first kind of step is to really get clear on that. And then we get to the middle diamond, which is all about empathy, standing in the shoes of the people we're designing for. What does it feel like for them? What do they want? What are their pain points? What are their frustrations? And getting really clear on what we call the moments that matter. And it's fascinating when you go through this process, the kind of the ideas you have at the beginning, very quickly you realize if you'd gone down that route, you probably would have done a whole load of work, which wouldn't have resulted in a great outcome. And then you get into the third space, which is the kind of the solution space. And that's the fun bit where you kind of use tools like ideation tools and you prototype and test. That's another big kind of light bulb for me over the years, is the power of prototyping and testing our ideas. So rather than kind of coming up with solutions in an ivory tower, can't we talk to people, say, is this going to solve this problem? Is this going to make this better for you? And taking that approach, and there's some really simple tools at each step of the journey that enable you to do that. The outcome you'll have will be far superior. And guess what? It will result in higher engagement. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Obviously, a lot more to it than that, but that's what we're talking about.
Yes. Yeah. And so one of the challenges then I sort of feel in organisations is that you do this work and you sort of get the idea of what's required, and then you can sort of set up policies and procedures, plans, and so on and everything else, and then it can become quite sort of rigid, and it's hard to treat people individually then, which, as we know, is one of the things that's really important. What are your thoughts around that you don't end up creating this sort of process that then actually works for, I don't know, half the people but not the other half because they're different people?
Yeah, I think, again, one of the powerful outcomes of using the approach, the sort of human-centered, people-first approach we talk about, is that you've got these great insights that really establish you as credible. I'll give an example. We work with, I won't say who, one of the big four accounting firms. So you've got 1 in 4 chance of guessing who it was. And the client we worked with there, it was on a new onboarding approach. And the client, we got a bunch of people in a room who'd been through it recently, and we did a load of online stuff as well. And it was incredibly energetic and inspiring journey to go through anyway. And they felt really great about being involved and being asked and all that kind of good stuff. Then when the client went to the board of that particular area and sort of said, here's what we've been doing, here's what we've found out, here's what we want to do. She said in her whole 20 plus year career of working in big four companies, it was the only time when she got a kind of, yes, just get on and do it. Normally you have to do papers, they go to committees, but the insight she shared was so powerful because it wasn't about her being an expert in this area in the world of people and HR. It was about her playing back what was really going on for real life employees. And that is so powerful. And in a way that was much more meaningful than a few kind of questions on a survey. It was like, this is a current lived experience of people who are joining our organization. And nothing makes the sort of C-suite sit up faster than playing back what's happening to their people. So it's an incredibly powerful way to kind of, establish that burning platform and make change happen. So, she was really proud of that. And she sort of said it's one of her absolute best experience moments because she'd never had that kind of reaction from the senior folks before. And that, yeah, great, just get on and do it. So I think that is a really powerful tool to sort of take it from, we'll just go and redesign a policy. Like I said before, you can have a great policy. Let's take policies around returning to work after a leave of absence. Maybe you've been on paternity leave or parental leave, or maybe some sort of extended sick leave. You can have a really good policy, But actually, if the experience, the emotions you feel when you're coming back in, and I'm sure I mean, this is something that often kind of really resonates. We've got lots of examples of this, and I've got some I can share. I work for companies that had like really kind of amazing like maternity policies. And I'm as a woman, I had 3 children in my in-house career, but I've had very, very different experiences of returning to work when I've had kids. Nothing to do with the policy. The policy
Mm.
was kind of sound, but the way it was enacted and the experience I had and the support around me and the views of people around me it was make or break in terms of my experience. I've had a very good experience. I've had 2 terrible experiences. So
Mm.
the policy alone isn't enough. And I think for too long, we've kind of had this expert-led approach in the world of people where we've focused on being the experts and we know what's best, but not really thought about all the human part that sits around that, the emotions we feel, what is it that we want in that situation? What's going to work for us? And that's where I think the magic really happens.
Yeah.
So, hopefully that kind of helps to bring a bit of light to that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So you talked about some sort of examples to share. I mean, I think always with these sorts of interviews, we hear the sort of, it's not the theory in this case, but we hear the what it is, and then we think,
Mm,
yeah, but what does that mean for me, or how can I make it work, or who's done this, and what's happened as a result.
mm.
Have you got some examples that you can share with us to sort of really bring this to life for us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've already shared the kind of the onboarding from the one of the big four. That was a really
Yeah.
interesting piece of work. I think one example, we were working with another client. Again, I won't name them because I might be in trouble if I do because I've not had permission. But they'd done a big piece of work around, relaunching the kind of behaviors, the culture behaviors, all that sort of stuff. And they'd done a really good job of like involving their people to design the behaviors, tick the box, great, best practice. And
Mm.
then as part of the kind of embedding piece, so they kind of did some research and some impact assessment showed that, people really supported the behaviors, they thought they were right for the company, all good stuff. And as part of the, as we know, when you do this kind of cultural change program, that's just the beginning, right? So how do you then embed these new behaviors to kind of build and support the culture you want to create? And one of the sort of activations they had was around a kind of I guess, a recognition scheme around these new behaviors. So they wanted a kind of peer to peer kind of recognition. Um, yes, to recognize people, but the real kind of benefit of doing this was to get real life examples of where employees were living and breathing the behaviors. They could use it to tell stories and to show people what good looks like. So kind of a win-win there. On paper, this all sounds great. And they'd gone out and they purchased this really slick piece of software, to kind of do this and we're excited about it. And they came to us and said, look, it's just not working. We can't work out why, because we know the first part of this whole program was very successful. People support this. No one's nominating. You're not getting any examples in and nothing's really changing. So we went in and we said, okay, and we did a design sprint with them. We got a bunch of people in a room, both online and virtual. Um, and literally within about 20 minutes, it was really obvious. The answers were really obvious that the team really well intentioned, but they designed this to work for them, hadn't thought about what might work for their people.
Yeah.
So the first point was that actually around half their people weren't online much, right? They worked in a kind of manufacturing environment, so they didn't want to log on and nominate people. That was just a pain for them to do that. Um, they'd also, I don't know if I'm sure the listeners use different sort of psychometric approaches. They might be using insights or DISC or whichever one you use, different personality types basically.
Yeah.
And those in the team were kind of real extroverts and they love to be in the spotlight. They love the limelight, Very quickly, when we went out and kind of did this design sprint, we heard from employees like, I couldn't think of anything worse than being recognised and having the spotlight on me. Couldn't think of anything worse. It puts the fear of God into me. Please don't call me out. So straight away, it was really clear why this wasn't working. It was a lovely idea, but if they thought about the people they were designing for and they'd done some empathy mapping and put themselves in the shoes of the people that were actually going to be using this system, they'd have realised it was never going to work. Right. So
Yeah.
they wasted a lot of money, time, and effort. So We then obviously found out, okay, what might work, what could work. And it was a much more sort of subtle approach. It was much more about, a thank you in the course of the working day. It wasn't about a kind of shiny sort of, behavior employee of the month type of scheme where people felt embarrassed by being spotlighted. It was about gathering stories in a much more subtle way. So stories were out there, but they had to use a very different way of kind of mining them. So that's another example, I suppose, of great idea, but just wasn't going to work for that particular company.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's another example.
Mm. And have you got other examples of common mistakes that organisations make when they're trying to improve their employee experience?
Yeah, I think for me the biggest mistake is making assumptions about what good looks like for our people. So, I
Mm.
mean, in my whole career, the one tool that I think is my absolute, if you do nothing else, just do this, is what I call the best experience tool. It's really simple. I'm sure you've heard me talk about it before, Joe, because it's something I talk about in every interview I ever do. But the best experience tool is a really simple tool from the world of positive psychology. Um, and it's about understanding what good looks like, right? So if we were doing this, I'd say to you, Joe, tell me about a time when you were, at your best at work, when you were loving what you were doing, when you were firing all cylinders. Tell me about a time when you just look back and you say, I just love that time at work. And it might be from yesterday, it might be from 20 years ago. It doesn't matter. And you talk to me about that. You tell me that story. You say, well, there was a time, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but you kind of tell me that story. And even when you do this, I do this with teams online and offline, the minute people start to share their stories, the whole atmosphere in the room changes. Suddenly people are sitting up and they're getting animated, they're getting excited. And you listen to those stories, okay, and you hear what comes out. Now, we talk about the best experience tool to do this. And it literally, if we were doing this for real, 10 minutes, right? You'd share 5 minutes, you'd share your story with me, I'd share my story with you. And in 10 minutes, we would both have a really great understanding of what good looks like for each other in a far deeper and more meaningful way than any survey could ever tell you, right? Because we haven't made assumptions. The problem with surveys, they're useful, but we decide what questions we're going to ask people, and they might not ever unearth what really matters to people, right? So when
Yeah.
you ask people, again, it's the way you ask the question, right? So if you said to people, what do you need to have a great experience at work? They might come up with a bunch of stuff that actually they don't need. So they might say, well, pay me lots of money and give me good coffee. But you know what? When you ask people to share a story about the best experience, the coffee never comes up. Pay, in 20 plus years of doing this, I've collected thousands of these stories. Nobody has ever said, I was having an amazing experience at work because I got paid lots of money, got a big fat bonus, or I had a shiny office, or fancy
Yeah.
coffee. That stuff doesn't come up. What
Mhm.
comes up are, well, two things really. So first of all, what I call the bucket of the universal theme. So there'll be some stuff that will be common pretty much in any organization you go into, because we're human beings and there's a lot that makes us human we have in common, right? So I've run these activities, these best experience conversations in pretty much every corner of the world. And I was surprised, when I first went to China like 10, 12 years ago, that the same things came up that came up in Europe. People want to belong. They want to feel connected. They want to work with great people. They want to feel valued. They want
Mhm.
to make an impact. They want to make a difference. They want someone to appreciate them, right? All of us have those same needs, right? So there will be the universal themes, but there'll also be the kind of individual differences. So for one person that might say, I was really clear on the brief. I knew what was expected of me, and I was really recognized through this work, and that was really important to me. Someone else might say, it was just really good fun. It was work hard, play hard. It was an adventure. Every day I never knew what was going to happen. There was no plan. It was just dead exciting.
Yeah.
Um, and you can see very quickly how using this approach can unearth what good looks like. And once you know that, then you know what to work on, right? So you go, okay, so that's what good looks like for our people or my team. How near or far away? What do we need to do to get more of this in our work? And most of what comes out will be within the local team, the local, employees' gift to control. It doesn't need to go back to a central team to manage as a project. Sometimes it might, but 9 times out of 10 it doesn't. It'll be things like autonomy, things like connection, and you can give people permission then to start to work on that. So if the listeners are interested, when lockdown came, 2025, 5 years ago now, I actually had a bit of time and space, as did a lot of us, to go back and analyze kind of 15 years worth of data. And I worked with a great intern at Sussex University, and we went back over all of the best experience conversations that I collected over the years, and there were
Hmm.
thousands of them. And we analyzed all that data, and we came out with what we call the EX lens model. So what the model does, it kind of brings out the universal themes, the things that were common across pretty much everybody, regardless of age, demographic, generation, culture. But it also makes the point about the individual differences as well. So if people are interested, they can download that from PeopleLab or from the EX space, and it kind of goes into detail there. So I think for me, that's the most powerful tool that we have in our toolbox. And the insights are invaluable, and it gives you a really good understanding of what you need to do and why.
Mm. Yeah, no, that sounds great. Thank you. I was just about to say, for people who are interested in taking some practical action on this, what's the one step that they can take straight away? Is that the thing? Is it go and find that?
Absolutely. Start there. And the great thing about it is then when you've done that, and it's so simple, I think once, I've used this with so many organizations, and I think, we talk about line managers a lot, right? And line managers are really busy. They're very often, promoted because they're technically good. And I know you guys talk about this a lot in the work you do. To ask them to suddenly, here's your staff survey results, engage your people. They're like, I haven't got a clue where to start. That feels
Yeah.
really big and overwhelming, right? And I don't even really know what engagement means. It's kind of a HR buzzword, right? If you work with line managers, say, if you work with them as employees first, and you say, tell me about a time you had a great experience at work, and you take them through the activity, and then you say, and they'll always go, "That was fantastic, thank you." And I've had people sort of say to me, "Thank you." I'd kind of forgotten how it feels to be in that space at work, and very senior people who said that to me. And then you
Hmm.
say to your line managers, "Well, do you think you can go and do that with your teams?" They go, "Oh yeah, that's dead simple. I could do that. It's not overwhelming. It's not scary. And it's also
Hmm.
very safe as well, because if I'm a line manager and I know my team aren't necessarily in the place I want them to be, I might be a bit frightened of opening that Pandora's box, because it might be a bit scary for me, because I might find out a load of stuff that I'm not really ready or able to deal with. It doesn't feel very psychologically safe. But as a line manager, if I ask my people to tell me about what they need at work to have a great experience, I'm still understanding what needs to change, but it's a much safer conversation to have. So
Hmm.
using it with line managers, getting them to go through it firstly as employees, and then saying, can you do that with your people? And if you need a bit of a reminder, here's a one page on how to do it, they'll go, yeah, no problem. And then they'll go and do it with their people. It gives them a really safe way of having these conversations, but incredibly powerful and impactful as well. So it's,
Mm.
yeah, really powerful tool to use.
Yeah, and I like the idea of, as you say, a lot of what needs to be done can be done at that local level with that team,
Mm,
and doesn't have to be sort of codified across the organisation in that situation.
yeah,
And I guess as things become successful and people start talking, you might have things that spread across the organisation, but that's not sort of the point, is it? It is about
yeah.
those individuals and doing something different for them in that moment, isn't it?
Yeah. And the
Mm.
great thing about this, you can gather all these insights back into the central team, and you can analyze that. And let's face it, now you've got ChatGPT or Copilot, whatever your AI is of choice. It can do that in seconds, right? In a way we've not been able to do before. And I wish I'd had that when I was analyzing
Yes.
that data like 5 years ago. But you can do that really quickly. And then you can go, okay, so if that's what good looks like for our people, are we asking the right questions in our survey? You might
Yeah.
be, but I guarantee there'll be some gaps. So
Yeah.
then you've got a really good sense around which are the questions we need to pay attention to.
Hmm.
Um, and they might not be the questions you're paying attention to now. I mean, no one ever says, I was having an amazing experience at work because the process and procedure allowed me to be efficient and effective, which is a classic kind of survey question. No one ever says that. And I'm not saying that question isn't useful to ask, because it can cause, it's a hygiene factor. Go back to Hertzberg here.
Yeah.
When things aren't efficient and effective, it's annoying. I'm not satisfied, but I'm never going to say I'm engaged because the processes were great. I'm not going to
No.
say that. So
No, no, exactly, exactly. Thank you so much, Emma. It's been really interesting talking to you, and we'll obviously get you back on again as you're a regular. So thanks for your time today. It's been really
Definitely.
helpful.
No, love to come back on. No, always up for the chat with you guys, and think you're doing amazing work and continue to support you and spread the word. So
Well, thank you.
thanks, Jo. Take care. Bye.
And just to let you know, next week we've got Dennis Franzak coming, who's an entrepreneur and executive advisor, and I'll be joining him to talk about true leadership's lasting and positive impact.
Engage for Success Radio, raising the profile of employee engagement and shining a light on good practice for people who believe there's a better way to work.